Archiving started.
Hello, this is Dr. Laist, and today I want to talk about Shirley Jackson's chilling short story, The Lottery. In many ways, The Lottery seems like a very simple story. The plot is not very complicated. The inhabitants of a small town gather in the town square for what appears to be some kind of raffle. At the end of the story, we discover that the winner of the raffle gets stoned to death by the rest of the townspeople. The story is told in simple, direct language by an objective narrator who describes the action of the story with journalistic neutrality and without commentary. This apparent artlessness, however, belies a very deliberate sense in which the narrator is manipulating us by withholding a crucial piece of information, the horrific nature of the lottery's prize. To a first-time reader of the story, Jackson seems to provide no indication that the lottery will end with a scene of senseless and brutal violence. By springing this ending on us without warning, Jackson achieved the shock effect that caused so many scandalized and outraged readers of The New Yorker to cancel their subscriptions when Jackson's story first appeared in that magazine in 1948. Once we get over the shock effect of the surprise ending, we can read the story again with a more wary set of eyes. In doing so, we discover a number of clues that do in fact seem to provide forewarning of what is to come. A first-time reader might not know what to make of the children piling up stones in the story's opening paragraphs. The passage may be describing some senseless childish game. On a second reading, however, the deadly significance of those stones and of the children's eager participation in gathering them takes on a frightening new dimension. Likewise, all of the small-town details and dialogue which seem to a first-time reader to portray a charming celebration of homespun rural communities are turned on their head. Rather than a nostalgic homage to folksy ways, the story reveals itself to be a scathing indictment of a secret brutality hidden below the surface of such communities. By requiring us to read the story twice to really understand what it's about, the plot of The Lottery suggests one of the important morals of the story itself: don't take anything for granted. Likewise, the characters in The Lottery seem devoid of complexity or interiority. We would have to call them flat characters, because they simply play the brutal role Jackson assigns to them. At one point, Mr. and Mrs. Adams seem to question the necessity of the lottery ritual, which may make them seem a little more open-minded and rounder, and Old Man Warner, with his crotchety defense of the lottery tradition, is as flat as a character can be. In general, however, the characters do not stand out as individuals. We know next to nothing about the personal lives of the characters or of their personalities, and this atmosphere of anonymity contributes to our sense that this story isn't about any of the individuals in the story, but about the character of the town itself. Even Mrs. Hutchinson, who is unwillingly promoted to the status of the story's main character after winning the lottery, is a stranger to us. We only know about her what we can infer from her panicky behavior as she becomes progressively set apart from the rest of the crowd as the chosen victim. She protests, claiming that the drawing wasn't fair. She tries to throw her daughter and son-in-law under the bus. She even, with her last words, "It isn't right," questions the justice of the lottery system. But Mrs. Hutchinson's actions are desperate acts that anyone faced with the imminent threat of death by stoning would be likely to display. These actions do not really belong to her as an individual, but to her as an anonymous representative of human panic. Mr. Hutchinson, likewise, in stoically obeying the rules of the game, becomes an anonymous representative of human conformity. The setting of the story is also anonymous. The town is unnamed and its location unspecified, although the references to corn planting and the coal business, the folksy idioms of the dialogue, clean forgot what day it was, and the social homogeneity of the community suggest associations with the Midwestern United States. At the same time, however, this town could just as easily be on one of the moons of Jupiter or something, because there are no references to American politics, Christian religion, earthling history, or any of the other clues that would stitch this town into the quilt of the world as we know it. Part of the off-kilter effect of this story is created by putting this very familiar-seeming town in this warped bubble of reality. Instead of politics, religion, or history, the citizens of Jackson's world have only the lottery. The nature of the lottery itself is an aspect of the story that is not exactly part of the plot, nor of the characters, nor of the setting, although it is obviously connected to all these other parts of the story. The lottery is a complex symbol at the heart of the story, and like all of the best symbols, the symbol of the lottery is a kind of machine for making different kinds of meanings. Some symbols may have a very specific meaning. For example, the United States flag is a symbol of the United States, not of Mexico or Peru. But at the same time, symbols have an open interpretability based on the relationship between the symbol and the person interpreting the symbol. The United States flag may also symbolize other things to many different people. It won't symbolize Mexico, but it might symbolize freedom, sacrifice, and hope, or military aggression, decadence, and hypocrisy. A literary symbol is very similar. There are structural limits within which we have to understand the symbol, i.e., the lottery does not symbolize Mexico, but within the basic structure of the lottery symbol, there are many different ways we might proceed with an interpretation. A good way to start thinking about a symbol is by identifying its component parts. The physical objects associated with the lottery are the black box, the ballots, most of which are blank and one of which is inked with a black spot, and the stones. The black box itself is the dark heart of the lottery ritual. No one liked to upset even as much tradition as was represented by the black box. There was a story that the present box had been made with some pieces of the box that preceded it, the one that had been constructed when the first people settled down to make a village here. In this passage, the box is described as a religious relic. To the villagers, the box symbolizes the past, their ancestors, and their origins. It is a magic object to which they must be faithful. But a black box is also a common expression to describe a hidden mystery. No one knows what goes on inside a black box. Behaviorist psychologists famously described the human mind as a black box, a fundamentally inaccessible enigma. As readers of the lottery, we may feel that the secret at the middle of the story is locked away in a black box. Why do these seemingly nice and neighborly people perpetuate this brutal ritual? What is Shirley Jackson saying about human nature? Why are human beings prone to conformity and scapegoating? These kinds of questions swarm around the black box at the center of the story, but the symbol of the black box itself may suggest that the answers to such questions are locked away from human view. The slips of paper that are used to determine the winner of the lottery and the stones used to kill the winner are also significant objects in the story. Thinking about them together, the lightness and apparent harmlessness of the paper in contrast with the heavy threat of the stones echoes the contrast we have already observed in the story as a whole between the apparent neighborliness of the townspeople and their violent ritual. Throughout most of the story, the part devoted to drawing the slips of paper, we have little reason to suspect that violence is afoot. It all seems like an innocent town-wide game. But when the townspeople switch from paper to rocks, there is a corresponding shift in our understanding of what is going on. We are suddenly jerked from small-town America into the Stone Age. But at the same time, we realize that the villagers' paper game was not really that harmless after all. It turns out that paper and stones are both tools in the same game. Violence can be done with paper just as surely as it can be done with rocks. And Jackson's symbolism equates the polite, bureaucratic, invisible violence done with paper with the physical savagery represented by rocks. Perhaps the most important feature of the lottery ritual, however, is not a physical object, but the effect it has on the social structure of the community. Throughout most of the story, the social role of the lottery is to bring everyone in the town together. Every single resident of the town gathers in what may appear to be a utopian picture of all the positive values we associate with a small town of friendly neighbors. Everyone knows each other by name, they all share the same store of gossip, and of course, they all share the lottery. A first-time reader might think that it would be kind of neat to live in a town that is so down-homey and neighborly. But of course, the most striking social effect of the lottery is that it identifies one member of the community to be isolated from the rest of the group. Soon after winning the lottery, Tessie Hutchinson finds herself in the center of a cleared space. Her neighbors are no longer her neighbors. She has been isolated, set apart, and cast out of the community. The lottery ritual fractures the social group by shaving off one individual, and then it reinforces the remaining community in shared hostility against the marked person. In ostracizing Mrs. Hutchinson, the rest of the town confirms its new unity in participating in the brutal murder of their common enemy. We generally tend to think of community as a positive value. In The Lottery, Shirley Jackson manipulates us into admiring the picture of community presented in the story and then pulls back the curtain to reveal that community as one based in ritualized violence. As a result, the reader is confronted with the necessity of revisiting her preconceived notions about the positive value of community. Is community cohesiveness always a good thing? Is it good to have a community where everyone does the same thing? What are feelings of group identity based on? Why do people value tradition as a positive value in itself? Of course, The Lottery is a fictional story, but if its narrative is so shocking to us, that effect is arguably a result of the fact that we recognize in the fictional story some disturbing grain of truth. It is easy to find historical parallels for the situation in The Lottery. In biblical tradition, the sins of the community were symbolically transferred onto a goat, the scapegoat, which was then set out into the wilderness. Human and animal sacrifice have been practiced in many cultures throughout history. A more immediate historical parallel for Jackson's 1948 readers would have been Nazi Germany, in which Hitler had managed to achieve a remarkable degree of social cohesion among the German people by isolating a member of that community, the Jews, as well as gypsies and homosexuals, for brutal execution. In 1969, more than 20 years after the original publication of the story, a 20-minute film version of The Lottery became one of the best-selling educational films ever. You can see it on YouTube. The success of that film suggests that the story resonated with audiences of that time as well, which is not surprising, considering that 1969 is the same year that the United States government instituted a countrywide draft lottery to determine the order of call to service in the Vietnam War. Jackson's nightmare scenario of a society that randomly sacrifices its citizens as a way of sustaining group solidarity may have seemed like an appropriate metaphor for that era. But no matter what time and place one lives in, the symbol of the lottery provokes reflection into what hidden sources of primitive violence may lie beneath the surface of polite society. Why do we get along with someone better when we have an enemy in common? To what extent is our prosperity based on a hidden violence committed against stigmatized others, such as undocumented laborers, sweatshop workers, or even animals and the environment? To what extent are our social institutions based on the blind inertia of tradition rather than on humane and rational principles? For all of the signs of progress that we see in our daily lives, are there aspects of human nature and human social behavior that remain rooted in our caveman heritage? The lottery doesn't answer any of these questions, but it provides us with a unique symbol that challenges us to question our stereotypes and assumptions. In a way, it is an extremely cynical story, depicting a vision of human nature that is ruled by conformity and violence. By provoking our pity and terror, however, Jackson's story calls on us to reflect critically on our own social rituals and to examine our own sense of community, optimistically affirming the importance of independence, reason, and compassion.